Delegation as a strategic discipline. Up till now, most of us have been taught to think of delegation as a way to manage workload, passing along tasks so we can free up time. That's useful, but it's not the full story. At a senior leadership level, delegation is less about taking things off your plate and more about building capacity in the system. It's about distributing ownership, distributing decision rights, and building agility in your team so that progress does not depend on you being in the room. Think of it this way. If delegation is just about tasks, then you're managing. If delegation becomes about transferring decision-making authority with clarity, you're leading. And that's when your team can adapt faster, solve problems without bottlenecks, and step into leadership themselves. So in this section, I want you to shift your mindset instead of asking, what can I hand off so I have more time? Ask, how do I use delegation to create a team that thrives independently and makes strong decisions without me? And that's what turns delegation into a strategic discipline. Now let's take this a step deeper. Most leaders think they're delegating when they hand off tasks. But often what's missing is the clarity about decision rights, the boundaries. Here's the difference. If I ask you to create a report for me, it's a task. You complete it, I will still decide what to do with it. But if I ask you to analyze the data and decide which recommendations go forward to the executive team, I've delegated a decision right. That's much more powerful, and it requires clarity. This is where the frameworks like RACI or RAPID comes in. They help us answer simple but critical questions. Who recommends? Who approves? Who owns the decision? And who needs to be informed? Without these boundaries, delegation gets quite messy. Task boomerang back, people stall because they don't know how far their authority goes, and leaders end up redoing the work they thought they delegated. So the challenge here is to shift your thinking. Don't just delegate the what. Delegate the how far. And when you pass along work, be explicit about whether you're delegating execution only or the authority to make the call. That decision is the line between busy managers and strategic leaders. Let's zoom into the brain for the moment. Delegation isn't just a leadership skill. It actually changes what's happening biologically in your team. When people have autonomy, when they trusted to make choices of their own work, the brain releases dopamine. That's the chemical linked to motivation and focus. That's what keeps people engaged and energized. When leaders demonstrate trust, we step back instead of micromanaging. The brain releases oxytocin and the hormone of connection and belonging. It tells your team, you're safe here, you matter, and you're trusted. The sense of psychological safety is one of the strongest predictors of high performance. And when expectations are clear and accountability is shared, the prefrontal cortex lights up. That's the part of the brain responsible for strategy, problem solving, and innovation. So effective delegation isn't just about getting things done. It is literally wiring your team's brains for higher engagement, stronger trust, and sharper thinking. That's why it's one of the most powerful levers you have as a leader. Most of us are familiar with a horizontal development. That's when people gain new skills, take a course, learn a new system, and add another tool to the belt. It's important. but it doesn't fundamentally change how they think. Vertical development is different. It's about getting someone's capacity to deal with greater complexity, ambiguity, and responsibility. And one of the most powerful ways to create that growth is through delegation. When you delegate a stretch assignment, not just a task, but the full ownership, you create what developmental psychologists call a heat experience. These are moments when people feel a bit uncomfortable because the responsibility is bigger than what they've done before. And when you pair that discomfort with support, it produces transformation. So here's the mindset shift. Delegation isn't only about efficiency. It's also one of the most practical tools we have for building the next generation of leaders. The question for you becomes, what are you holding on to that could become a growth experience for someone else? That's where delegation truly implies impact. So let's step back and look at the context we're all leading in today. We often describe it as VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and hyperconnected. In environments like this, leadership bottlenecks become very dangerous. Imagine traffic at a red light. If one signal is blocked, the entire flow of cars grind to a halt. And what happens is every decision has to go through the leader. People wait, opportunities slip. Risk escalates. Leaders end up exhausted because they're the single point of throughput. Now picture a network of open intersections where responsibility and decision-making are distributed. Traffic keeps moving. Even if one intersection slows down, that's what happens when delegation is strategic. Teams can adapt quickly, respond to change, and act without waiting for the bottleneck to clear. This is why delegation isn't only about efficiency. It's not just about saving time and getting stuff off your desk. It's about organizational agility and resilience. In fast-moving contexts, the speed of response is often more valuable than perfect control. So the leadership challenge becomes, where are you still the red light? What decisions are still stuck and waiting for you? And how might your team move faster if you shared more ownership? Even if that means decisions are sometimes made differently than you would have made them previously. What if you want a team that's capable of navigating complexity without you being in the middle of every single choice? Delegation has to move from being a convenience to being a deliberate system for agility. Let me give you a real-world example. A global logistics company once faced a sudden port closure due to political unrest. In one region, every decision had to run back through the country manager. The team on the ground knew alternate routes and had options, but they waited for sign-off. They waited and waited for sign-off. By the time approval came, shipments were already backed up and clients were furious. In another region of the same company, the local team had been given clear decision rights in advance. They didn't need to ask for permission. They simply acted, and within hours, they rerouted shipments through secondary ports, updated customers proactively, and kept goods moving. The difference? In the first case, the leader became the red light, and agility was lost. In the second, delegation had built resilience, and the leader wasn't bypassed, but they had created a system where authority and trust were already in place. That's the power of strategic delegation. Your team can respond in real time, even when you're not in the room. By the time we get to senior leadership, most of us know the basics of delegation, but even experienced leaders fall into advanced traps. Let's unpack a few of them. First, there's reverse delegation. That's when you hand something off, but because expectations or authority weren't clear, the task boomerangs back to you. The team member says, I wasn't sure what to do. Can you just decide? Suddenly, you're doing the work again. Second, over-delegation. This is when leaders push too much down without context, guidance, or support. It feels like empowerment on the surface, but it's actually abandonment. People get overwhelmed, mistakes pile up, and trust erodes. Third, under-delegation. This is the opposite trap. When we hold on too much, because of fear, perfectionism, or ego, it gives us short-term comfort, but long-term stagnation. The team never grows and the leader becomes the bottleneck. And finally, in today's world, there's tech delegation. Now we have to decide not just what to hand to people, but what to hand to systems in AI. What belongs in human judgment? What can be automated? Leaders who don't make those calls proactively risk both inefficiency and disengagement. So how do we navigate these pitfalls? It comes down to a mindset shift. Instead of asking, how can I do this faster? Ask, who's the best person or system to own this? That is the who, not how mindset. There's actually a book called Who, Not How. This forces us to see delegation not as a loss of control, but as a way to leverage the full capacity of the team and the tools available. The leaders who get this right aren't just freeing up calendars. They're creating organizations that can think, act, and adapt independently. And that is the true test of effective delegation. So we've covered quite a bit of ground here, moving from delegation as a basic skill to delegation as a strategic discipline. Now I want to bring it back to you. Take a moment to reflect. What are you currently holding on to that may be limiting your team's growth? Is it a decision that always sits with you? Is it a project you convinced yourself only you can do? Or perhaps, is it a fear that if you let go, the outcome won't match your standard? Or that you could be working yourself out of a job? Here's the challenge. Identify one specific delegation experiment you can run in the next month. Not a wholesale change, not just one you'll consciously hand off, but with clarity about outcomes, authority, and support. Now jot it down and then share it. That conversation will help you sharpen your idea and hold you accountable. Because the only way delegation becomes real is when we put it into practice. Remember, great leaders don't just do more. They multiply impact through others. And I'm going to repeat this because it's important. Great leaders don't just do more. They multiply impact through others. And this is where the multiplier effect begins. Thank you for leaning into this conversation on delegation as a strategic leadership discipline. If you'd like to keep learning alive, we'd love for you to join us beyond today. Click and follow our YouTube channel and subscribe to our Wednesday Wisdoms. In a short, practical leadership insight we release every week. It's a way to stay sharp, stay inspired, and keep building your leadership capacity one week at a time. See you soon.